That's the first time that's ever happened to me, but yeah, here we are. So anyway, welcome to this talk. I've got some slides that I'm waiting to have the clicker for, so I'll just begin with an introduction. I'm really glad that this. Well, I'm not glad that it's Saturday because it's our last day. That's sad. I'm really glad though that this talk got scheduled for Saturday because it's really designed to be the talk for me, for my purposes anyway, that kind of ties things together. And that's because where it came from was I got my dad, who was 60 or so, 62 at the time. He had not eaten that great of a diet his whole life, and he started having some heart problems. And I've been kind of trying to put this little message in his ear for about 6-7 years about this plant-based thing and said, hey, this could really help. But there's a certain reluctance, I think, to listen to family members when they have good advice to you. And you kind of need somebody who has the credentials of not being your family member to tell you. So I brought him along to an event in Toronto with me, and I could tell he was really getting into it. I was speaking at it, but there were many other speakers, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Greger, lots more. And the full weekend was all about inspiration and evidence, and he, after 2 or 3 days of this, was clearly pretty convinced by the science, and he was really on board. But I kept waiting for the talk that was going to tell him, when you get home, and you wake up the next day and you're back in the real world, here's how you start. Like, here's what you eat. Here's how to begin. So that's really where, thank you, Dave. That's where the talk came from. And so it's certainly a way, I think it's a great one for beginners. For people who have, if you're sort of new to this, ready to take it to another level maybe, and you're inspired and you believe it, and maybe you've learned some tricks along the way from different cooking classes and things like that. What I hope this can be is the one that provides the framework for you to get started and guides for the next 5 or 10, 20 years maybe. But it's not just for beginners. And the reason I say that is because actually this is a system that I evolved for myself, and it took me 5-6 years of being vegan before I even started to think this way. So this is an odd font, but that's what I get for being late, I guess. Sort of robotic and high tech, so a little more high tech than this talk actually is, but that's okay. So anyway, my story, just so you can see where this evolved from and where I am coming from with this, is that I had a very typical diet growing up. Was not particularly athletic. I did sports like any other kid, but didn't really excel at that much of it. And then in college, some friends and I got the crazy idea that we were going to run a marathon. We were just all into challenges and showing that we could do it and trying to be, I guess, macho. I don't know what it was, but we maybe stupid is what it was. None of us had ever run before. We said, we're going to do this marathon. And then that same night, somehow first that was a half marathon. Then it escalated into a marathon. And then it escalated into, we're going to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Which, if you know much about running, that's something almost very few runners do. Maybe 5-10% of runners who are pretty serious, who become marathoners, ever run a marathon fast enough to get into Boston. So that's what we said we were going to do. We did the training, got to the start line, took off running, trying to get this 3-hour and 10-minute marathon, which is 7 minutes and 15 seconds per mile is what it took us to do. Well, I didn't run a 3:10, I ran a 4:52, so I missed it by 104 minutes. But I did it, and I'm proud of myself for doing it. But the best part, though, is that failing by that much, it lit something inside of me on fire and said, if I'm kind of in the best shape of my life now, because I've just run a marathon, this is a good accomplishment, what would it actually be like to run a 3:10 marathon? Like, how much of a difference would it be between me, who now I think I'm someone who's in shape, and someone who can run a marathon 4 minutes per mile faster than I just did? So I kind of said, I'm going to somehow find a way to make this happen. And I set off on this journey that ultimately lasted 7 years or so. The very first step of that journey was looking at some food things. So I didn't really consider plant-based diet yet. That wasn't part of my world at all. But I just started thinking about protein, fat, carbohydrate, actually thinking about what I was eating for the first time. Which doesn't mean it was a healthy diet, but it was the very first step, just to sort of focusing on macronutrients and thinking about protein, carbs, and fat. So that led to improvements. I learned how to run, I learned how to train, I learned how to avoid getting injury. Finally, I reached this point where I plateaued. About 6 years in, I plateaued and also started getting hurt. And at the exact same time, started having this ethical urge to become vegetarian. Still didn't really know what vegan was, but said, maybe I can go vegetarian. Maybe somehow it'll still work with the marathon training, even if it kind of is the end of my Boston journey. So the short story is that it worked really well. I did it. I started my website, nomeatathlete.com, and just started documenting what I was doing. And then 6 months later, I took the final 10 minutes I needed off my marathon time to get myself into Boston. And I do credit a lot of that to this plant-based diet, or at that point, just a vegetarian diet. So then from there, I kind of realized now that as I started the website, I started to come across people and books and ideas, and realized that not only could going further with this, making it a fully plant-based vegan diet, that not only could that not hinder me, it actually might help me to get better. And it turned out it did exactly that. I completely stopped getting injured when I went vegan, and after running Boston, I got into 50-mile races, and then eventually even did a 100-mile race. At that time, completely vegan, running more miles than I'd ever run in my whole life. I mean, a 50-mile, training run was a few weeks before the 100, and that was just, I couldn't even imagine doing that the way I was before. So that was this, had kind of represented this giant shift in the way I was eating, from this not caring at all about food to focusing on macronutrients to going vegetarian, now going vegan. And at this point, during this 100-mile training, actually, this is a nice little symbolic reminder for me of when I really started thinking about whole food plant-based, is when during that 100-mile training, I was taking this hemp protein powder that I just sort of relied on and had taken ever since I went vegetarian and figured I needed that. But I ran out of it one day during the training, and just out of laziness, I had a new daughter at the time, so we were very busy, lots of other stuff going on, and I just didn't go buy more protein powder. I just kind of didn't make it a priority. And a few weeks went by, and I kind of kept reminding, saying, hey, I gotta get to the store and get that protein powder. Finally, 3 months went by, and I just realized, hey, I've been training for a 100-mile run, running more miles than ever, and I never got that protein powder. So at that point, I kind of really gravitated towards, all these whole foods, the store whole foods included in that, but just totally changed the way I was eating, and my focus just became eat whole foods. I didn't even care anymore about the macronutrients, which was interesting because that's how this started, was thinking about protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And I got to the point where I was only eating whole foods, plant foods of course, and no longer needing to think about that. And I think that's an important spot in my journey because I think that's where a lot of people are and often end up. This place where they say, I eat whole foods and they're plant-based and I don't need to think about it any more than that. And I think that's fine, and I think that's way, way better than the way most people eat. But I started to realize that there's another level, that it's no longer about focusing on macronutrients. It's also not just not caring what you eat, as long as it's plant-based and whole foods, but now, what if we focus on the micronutrients? What if we choose those whole foods, still eat mostly whole foods, not with too much stress, but start saying, what foods can I choose that are going to provide the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, these phytonutrients, these things we don't even understand yet, that provide this tremendous recovery benefit in the short term for athletics, and those same exact things provide protection in the long term, longevity, health span, all that great stuff. So that's how I started thinking, and that's really what this talk is about, this kind of, this framework that I started to think about. So what I'm going to talk about here is the 7 foods to eat every day. I know the title of this talk in the program is 10 foods to eat every day, so I'm not shorting you 3 foods, I promise. There are 3 honorable mentions at the end of this talk that I will just gloss over very quickly because they're really simple to get. But I think it's important. So I'm going to talk about these 7 foods. I'm going to break down quickly, in very, very practical terms, why do we want these things? What do we need to know about them? What kind of practical tips are there for getting the most from them? And then finally, how do you actually build them into your diet? And I'm not going to try to get hung up in the scientific evidence and I'll cite a few studies, but that's not my job. Like, what I do well is creating systems and making things really practical and doable for normal people. So that's what we'll mostly focus on. And then my favorite part of this talk is actually the 3 meals that make it easy, the framework that makes it easy to get these foods. Because in doing No Meat Athlete now, which I guess I didn't really do, didn't leave time for an introduction with my late arrival, my stylish arrival. I run a site called nomeatathlete.com, and I've had the privilege through that of dealing with hundreds of thousands. Nomeatathlete.com. There you go. But through that, I've had the privilege of dealing with, I mean, not directly one-on-one, but just seeing hundreds of thousands of people who consider themselves athletes or at least fitness-minded and at least interested in plant-based diets, whether they're vegan, vegetarian, or just starting to think about it. But I've realized just in these 8 years now that No Meat Athlete has existed, that it doesn't matter what you do for 2 or 3 months or even a year of your life. If it doesn't affect your long-term trajectory in some way, if you're just picking up a diet, picking up a new plan, and then just throwing it away because you eventually can't stick to it, it doesn't matter. What matters is the thing that you make last 20 or 40 years. That's the stuff that really makes a difference on your health. And there are so many of these 7 foods or 10 foods or whatever, I think there are 3 talks with that sort of thing in the title on this very cruise. And they're in all the magazines. But for the most part, those ideas get lost because we say, yeah, I'm going to eat more goji berries or acai whatevers. And then we forget about it, right? We might try like for one meal or one day to do that, but then we get rid of it. So really the best part of this talk, I think, is the meals, the system that makes it easy to get these. And the reason it is that, the reason I think it's so good or so helpful is because it's flexible and it's loose and you can adjust it to your taste so that it's sustainable. Because if it's too rigid, nobody's going to stick with it. At the same time, it's simple, very, very easy to get started with, and I think the foods that we talk about, this way of eating is actually very pleasant and, in fact, pleasurable, and that's what it takes to start habits, rather than trying to say, I'm going to do this impossible task and just tough it out, because that never, ever lasts, unfortunately. And finally, I'll show you what one perfect day looks like on this regimen of eating, and then we will hopefully have some time for questions and answers. So, I mentioned that I went through this shift of thinking about just eat whole foods and I'll be fine, to what whole foods can I eat to maximize my recovery in the short term, protection against disease in the long term. And the very first book that got me started down this path was Dr. Joel Fuhrman's book, Super Immunity, which I'm sure almost everybody here has heard of Joel Fuhrman. Super Immunity you may not have heard of, because everybody knows Eat to Live, which is his big master work that was the #1 bestseller and that everyone has lost all this weight with. And that book is a great book. It's dense and it's a long one, and it's not that easy to just hand to a parent and say, hey, read this book because I think this is a great encapsulation of a healthy lifestyle. Super Immunity is that book, and in fact both my parents have read it. My dad, who, I don't think I mentioned the end of that story, that he did go vegan at that event and has been that way 2 years now running since then, and he's had all these tremendous improvements, worked with Dr. Joel Kahn a little bit, and he just loves this lifestyle. And now my mom's here with me this cruise, and I'm hoping the same result will happen. But, who knows? Yeah. My ulterior motive was to leave out my mother-son time. That was the idea. So anyway, in Fuhrman's book, he provides this nice little mnemonic device, which he calls G-bombs. And it's basically the choice of which foods are the most helpful for you to get. Which ones should you try to build into your diet every single day, a step beyond just eat whole foods and I'll be fine. And what that stands for is greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds. And what I did when I read this was just repeated it 50 times in my head, and then I never forgot it after that. So if that's the goal, then greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds, reorder it however you want, but those are the foods you want to get. So what that means, that is a useful device, but of course that's not the full explanation. Greens also means the full legume family, so also including chickpeas and lentils there. Sorry, greens are green, they're not lentils. Greens means leafy greens, which is self-explanatory. Beans means the full legume family, which is lentils and chickpeas, as well as what we all know as beans. Onions also includes garlic. That's the allium family. There are many other onion-like vegetables that fit just as well in there, scallions, leeks, those sorts of things. Mushrooms are pretty much just mushrooms, lots of varieties, but the point is eat mushrooms. And with berries, he groups pomegranate seeds in there. It's sort of like berry-like. They're sort of fleshy little vibrant colored things, just like berries are. So they kind of do the same thing for you. And then with seeds comes nuts, great longevity food, and grouped very well together because they have a lot of similarities. So that got me started. This was the first I started thinking in this way. My problem with it was that it wasn't quite enough. So this doesn't represent that many calories throughout the day. So if I was eating, when I was training to run 100 miles, if I was eating 3,000 calories a day, to get these foods, like those might only take 700 of those calories. So then it was like, well, what do I do with the rest? It felt like there was an opportunity to do even more. It's not very hard to work these into your diet every single day. Mushrooms are kind of the hard one, but I think they're also maybe the weakest of these, the one with the least evidence for we should be eating them every single day. So the next thing that came along in my life was someone you may have heard of, which is Dr. Michael Greger. Right. He has this Daily Dozen, which his book How Not to Die is incredible. You should buy it if you haven't already done that. And most of it is like him going through these common ailments, these common common killers, and talking about how a plant-based diet can help you to prevent or reverse them. But my favorite part of the book is the 120 or 150 pages at the end that is his daily dozen, where he talks about these foods that he recommends you get all the time. And it's just such a great little practical nutrition thing. If you read no other part of that book, or of any book, honestly, I would get that book and read that section. It's just such great guidance about how to eat on a day-to-day basis. So, just for those who can't see, his daily dozen are beans, berries, other fruits, cruciferous vegetables, greens, other vegetables, flax seeds, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, whole grains, beverages, and exercise. So, this is great. This is comprehensive. This solved my problem of there aren't enough things in here to fill up my calories, and really provided more things than you could eat only these things and perhaps finish a day or many days without getting the number of servings that he recommends of these. So this is actually a challenge to get this. The recommended servings of all these things isn't all that easy. And where I had problems with it, he has the Daily Dozen app that kind of makes it easier for people to track what they're doing and check off the boxes as you eat these servings. Where I kind of fell short with this, and I don't know that everybody would, but my problem with not having a system was that I would do this and I'd eat what I thought were healthy meals, and me wanting to check all those boxes, I'd get to the end of the day and I'd have time for maybe one more dessert or snack if I really wanted to cram something in. And in that, I would look at my boxes and I would need to get berries, flax seeds, onions, green tea, and go for a run. And I'd be like, what am I going to do? So that's what I said. And no fault of Dr. Greger. He provided this amazing list. What I had to do was create a system for myself to get the stuff. And that's what we do here. So that's, I wanted to make it automatic so that I could not have to think about it, not have to worry about that list or be stressed about checking those boxes, to just know that the foods I naturally ate, for the most part, would get me really close to checking all those boxes. So what I've done here is, in this talk, is really condensed and combined Greger's and Furman's list. Looked at the overlaps, figured where we could slash some things that are less important than others, and make it a little bit simpler. So we don't have a dozen foods, we have 7. Like leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables. One example of me grouping something together just for simplicity's sake. Leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables are not the same thing. They just have a lot of overlap. A lot of leafy greens are also cruciferous vegetables. So it's very convenient to try to get those in the same place when you can. So why should we get leafy greens? Why are they so important to eat, as everyone seems to agree that they are? For me, it comes down to their Andy scores, which is a measure of their micronutrient content. I don't think Whole Foods still does this. I haven't seen it in a long time anyway. But they used to have it where their salad bar, each food on there would be labeled with a single number of how good it was, which is kind of a funny behavior that we would say, let's boil each food down to one single number and then rank them. But that's what we did, and kale and collard greens and mustard, those things got 1,000. They normalized the things so that those best ones had 1,000, and then milk had -500 or whatever it did. But the way it worked was, it was in line with Joel Furman's formula for health. And his formula for health is nutrients divided by calories. So that's not macronutrients, that's micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, the phytonutrients and phytochemicals that are, some we understand, some we don't. But you take all that, you measure all that, and then divide it by how many calories are in that given amount that you use to measure. So the more nutrients in the fewest number of calories turns out to give you the healthiest food. So that's where this Andy score came from. And the greens are the ones that are at all the top of the list. So in terms of micronutrient density, if that's how we're trying to eat, then they're the most important food. The problem is, they're so important. Everyone knows that. But they're also extremely easy not to eat. They're easy to eat when you actually make them. Most people on a cruise like this especially are very open to the idea of eating their greens. The problem is they don't show up automatically in most of our foods. Unless you make the effort to make that salad, or the effort to make the greens on the side, you can pretty well, when you're in a hurry, the greens are usually the first thing that kind of drops off, because it's pretty easy to just go through, do the default thing, and not have greens in your diet. And a great example of this is a statistic I heard from Michael Greger, which is that only 1 in 25 Americans gets 12 servings of greens in a month, when he recommends 12 servings of greens in a week. So it's easy to kind of get lost in thinking statistics and make them lose their meaning, but if that stat was the average American eats 12 servings of greens in a month, when in fact they should get 12 in a week, that would be a signal of a major problem, right? That'd be like, we've got the foremost nutrition expert here saying, get 12 servings a week, and the average person only gets a quarter of that much. That's a problem. But that's not what this stat is. This stat is 1 out of 25 Americans. The exception, the best of the people who are on this cruise, get 12 a week instead of 12 a month. So that's just how bad that is. It's a food that we absolutely need to build into our diets more. And that's the first place to start. So how do you do it? Eating them raw and cooked is a nice tip that I think is useful. Like a lot of people want to pick and they want to know, do we eat them raw or do we eat them cooked? The answer is even both. There's lots of good stuff in raw vegetables that does get destroyed in the cooking process. So you don't want to ignore raw vegetables. And for the most part, we get the cooked stuff. It's the raw stuff we need to make the effort to actually get onto our plate. So that probably deserves more focus. But cooked greens definitely have their benefit, and one of the biggest perhaps is that if you take a giant bowl of spinach and dump it into a pan and saute it in water for a little bit, it gets down to the size of your fist. So that makes getting those 12 servings of greens per week way easier than it does than just eating pure salad. So if you eat a salad every day, and then a few times a week have a giant batch of greens, you're going to get that 12 a week pretty easily. So raw and cooked is the way to go. And then the other thing that I've found really useful over the years is learning to buy heads of greens, not just the packaged clamshell stuff. Because that is one of the worst things when you go to the grocery store, you dig around, you make sure the stock people aren't looking, and you try to find the one with a really late expiration date on it, and you pick it. And then you get home and you find that somehow in the trip between the grocery store and home, you now have some shriveled up arugula leaf in there that just ruins the whole thing. So what works so much better than that, if you are able to do it, is buy the whole heads, bring them home that way. They're still on the stem, and they're still getting that nutrition. They're still in some way alive. Do that, chop them up when you're ready to eat them, and they will last, chopped yourself, will last in the fridge much longer than that clamshell usually will. So that's my tip for eating salads or eating greens without wasting quite so much. And as far as making salads go, I tend to like to get 1 part romaine lettuce or green leaf, the mild stuff, and then 1 part something more bitter, a little more interesting flavor-wise, but also providing much more nutrition. Because typically those bitter greens are going to provide more nutrition than the mild lettuce as well. So where do you get them? Pretty obvious that a salad is a great choice for building greens into your diet. We've also mentioned dinners, kind of as a side. You can stir it into lots of soups and all sorts of other things. You can just add those extra servings of greens in. And then if you drink smoothies, that's another great opportunity. You can throw a handful of spinach in there. In fact, if you do have those clamshells and they're starting to go bad, as soon as you have the sense that it's beginning to happen, stick it in the freezer and just stop in the process then, and then throw those handfuls into your smoothies later on. As I said, I like the practical stuff. I try to go with the small steps and like little bits better than nothing idea. Probably because I have 2 kids and I've kind of learned that if I give them a smoothie that is full of greens, they're going to conclude that they hate smoothies and they're not going to drink smoothies again. Even if I provide just fruit smoothies, they're going to say, oh no, we don't like that because I had too many greens that one time. So what I'll do is just take it easy. Like a little bit is fine. Keep adding more up to the point where you can taste them, and then next time back off just a little bit from there. It's just not that easy to tell someone, hey, here's this new vegan diet, and drink this green monster smoothie that we call a green monster, and it's green, and it tastes terrible. So I would say, make the good stuff, add some really healthy stuff in there, but for the most part, make it easy on people, including yourself. So cruciferous vegetables is the other one I've looped in here with the greens. The examples of cruciferous are kale, collard greens, mustard greens, bok choy, arugula, broccoli, cauliflower. I think that's cabbage over there that's cut off. Radishes, Brussels sprouts. Is there any way to move the slides like 3 inches to the left? If not, it's not a big deal, but just in case. Anyone know what do these have in common? Those vegetables I just listed. What? Antioxidants, yes. Okay. What else? What makes them seem like the same group? Yes.
They have sulfurethane.
Yes. There you go. So that translates into people don't like them. Kids don't like them. They taste bitter. They have these sulfur-containing compounds. And so they all have this sort of pungent taste that really is kind of an acquired taste, and you start to enjoy it as you do more of it, but that's why people stay away from these things, because they have that bitter taste that a lot of, especially kids, don't like. The real reason they're called cruciferous, just for dinner table trivia, if you'd like to be really popular among your friends, is to tell them that cruciferous vegetables all produce a 4-leaf flower that has a cross shape, hence the cruce prefix. So, yeah, exactly. Hey, there we go, slide. Okay, so as we mentioned, they contain this sulfur-containing compound that, if the right process happens, results in isothiocyanates, sulforaphane being the one that most people know. These are tremendously powerful anti-cancer compounds that you absolutely want to get. They are the reason to get cruciferous vegetables, so you absolutely want to make sure that you do actually get that, and I'll talk about that just in a minute. You may have heard it already on this cruise, but it's still important. You want to make sure you don't waste the ITCs that can potentially come from your cruciferous vegetables. Dr. Furman has concluded that they are twice as powerful as other vegetables and fruits in fighting disease, specifically cancer. And the rationale for this is that if you look at population studies, when a population ups their vegetable intake by 20%, you see a resulting 20% roughly decrease in cancer rates. But when you increase cruciferous vegetables by 20%, the decrease in cancer rate is 40% in these specific population studies. So that's where the twice as powerful comes from. Now, as I mentioned, it's really important that you let these ITCs get created, and the way they do is through a chemical reaction that happens when the cell walls are broken in the cruciferous vegetables. So that's from chopping or chewing. So if you eat them raw, you're totally fine. You don't need to worry about it. If you eat them raw, there's an enzyme in there that combines with these sulfur-containing compounds to produce the ITCs. If you eat them raw, that reaction takes place in your body before you fully digested it, and you get it, and you get the benefit. So that's great. If you're not going to do that, though, it's really, really important that you give that reaction time to happen. And that means chop those vegetables 40 minutes before you cook them, because the cooking is going to destroy the enzyme that you need to produce the ITCs like sulforaphane. So if at all possible, do the chopping earlier in the day. If you can do like a lunchtime meal prep thing. For most people, I know it's not that practical, so just doing it at dinner time is a great way to do it. My favorite way is to chop the stuff ahead of time when it's time to make dinner. Do a little chopping session, chop your cruciferous vegetables, and as we'll see, onion and garlic also should be treated something like this way if you can. That's when I then serve the salad after I chop that stuff, because once that salad is on the once the hot dinner is coming out, people in my family tend not to want the salad anymore. So, but I found that if I'm cooking and I just have a salad there on the side as I'm doing it, or I give it to people while they're smelling hot food, then they'll eat the salad. So what I do is chop all that stuff ahead of time, then make the salad, let people eat that, and then continue with the rest of the meal. So that's the typical cooking process, but there's a really nice shortcut here, which you probably heard, that is, you can actually, if you messed up, or if you just didn't have time to let the vegetables sit after chopping before you cook them, you can actually resupply that enzyme in the form of raw cruciferous vegetables at the time of eating. So because mustard greens are a cruciferous vegetable, then mustard powder, which turns out is raw, you can actually sprinkle that onto your cooked broccoli or your cooked cabbage or whatever, and you are now resupplying the enzyme from the raw cruciferous vegetables that will make this reaction still happen. Another way to do it would be like shaving raw cabbage, or shaving broccoli, the heads of broccoli onto your cruciferous vegetables and so on. So really important tip, don't waste those cruciferous vegetables. How do we get them? Salads are a really, really great way to do it. We said that raw is the best. If you eat them raw, then you just don't have to think about all this process. So raw is the way to do it. Mix it in with your salads. With hummus or bean dip, as Juliana Heber says, hummus should be its own food group, and I agree with that completely. But dipping cruciferous in hummus is just such a really great snack, and it's healthy and it tastes delicious. And of course, lots of dinners can incorporate cruciferous vegetables and should. And when I talk about how to prepare some dinners, you'll see that they do show up quite often. But when you do that, make sure you are mindful of preserving the ITCs. Okay, so that is, I think we're going to stop working. There we go. All right, so that's group number one. I know that we had two groups in one there, so that one took a while. These other ones will move somewhat faster. The next group is berries and other fruits. You can see from this picture that they're really vibrantly colored, and we'll see that is a recurring theme among healthy foods. When they are vibrantly colored, it means they have lots of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds, and that's the exact things that are going to help you with short-term recovery from sports or disease or whatever, but also help with prevention in the long run. So, berries and other fruits, why do we want to get them? What's so good about them? We had the 2010 Global Burden of Disease study, where they set out to figure out, why are we so unhealthy? What about our lifestyle is making our population the way it is for the most part? And the number one reason, the number one problem they found with the standard American diet, through all this good science, was that we don't eat enough fruit. So that's really important and kind of surprising if you Google on the internet, should I eat fruit? You know what you'll find. You'll find all kinds of people telling you sugar is the devil and you should never eat it, and it's just too much fructose. You'll find all these different reasons why you should not be eating fruit. But when it's done in any sort of really good organized fashion, fruit turns out as the thing we're just ignoring. We're not getting enough of that. So it turns out the reason maybe for this discrepancy is that people assume sugar is bad, which generally when it is taken out of the whole food, it is not very good for us. But when it's in whole fruit form, it comes with all the other things in the fruit that helps our body learn how to deal with that sugar and actually use that sugar in some helpful way. And a great example of this is a study I've heard from Dr. Greger cited where people drink sugar water. They have one group drink just sugar water, which obviously results in a blood sugar spike. The other group drinks the same amount of sugar water, but on top of that, they also eat some blackberries. So they're actually taking in more sugar at a time than the other group did. But it turns out that this blood sugar spike in the group that took the blackberries with their sugar water is actually lower. It's blunted by the blackberries. So we have the case of adding sugar and blunting the blood sugar spike. Blackberries seem to be particularly good at that, but the idea is that whole fruit is the reason that's happening. So get your fruit whole. We'll see how to do that in just a minute. What do we need to know about fruit, and particularly berries? You know, they're expensive. We all know that. Berries are one of the most expensive foods that vegans buy. They also are often needed to be, we want them to be organic because they are often on that dirty dozen list. I actually don't know, I was trying to get on the internet a few minutes before this talk to make sure that strawberries were still #1 on the Environmental Working Group's dirty dozen list. Does anyone know if they are?
Yep.
In 17 they were.
Yeah, okay, but 18's not out yet. Who knows? Anyway, so strawberries are the one that, for me, we still want to get organic. Because honestly, you know, the budget is a concern when it comes to, we spend a lot on food, but I still try to find ways to save money, honestly. And you know, my kids, like, they love the, when we buy them each a little half-pint thing of raspberries and put that out at breakfast time, like, I'm just so conflicted as a parent then, because I see them eating these berries and they'll just devour the entire plastic container of it. And I'm like, that is wonderful. But you're also lighting dollar bills on fire and, like, you're really cumbersome. So, we do our best to keep the berry costs down in our house. And one way to do that is frozen. Frozen works really well. As you'll see in this minute, I'm a big fan of smoothies, and frozen strawberries in a smoothie, you know, often work really, really well and are considerably cheaper. And you don't lose much nutrition when you freeze berries, because you do preserve most of that because they're frozen so quickly after they're picked, rather than having to be shipped on the truck in non-frozen form. As I mentioned, frozen is more affordable, so where do you get these berries and other fruits? I mean, berries are another one that aren't that easy to just show up in your diet. They just tend not to if you don't make the effort. That's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of smoothies. I know there's a lot of controversy about smoothies, and we will get into that a little bit. Oatmeal is a perfectly viable alternative, though, if you don't want to do the smoothies. You can get most of the things in your oatmeal that you could in a smoothie, and this way you're not blending it. So that works really well for a lot of people. But you know, having some sort of reliable meal, as we'll see when we get to the 3 meals here, is really the only way that I can consistently get myself to eat berries. I'm just not going to tend to reach for them as a snack very often, or remember to buy them because they're expensive. I'll kind of steer away from them. So, you know, having a meal that is built, that is an automatic type of thing that incorporates them, that's the way to get yourself to eat all of these foods. Having these automatic meals that you do, rather than thinking, okay, I need to make sure I eat more broccoli throughout my meals, because that just typically doesn't happen. Same with blueberries or strawberries or whatever. All right, group number 3, flax seeds and other nuts and seeds. Another kind of controversial one. Flax seeds, they are anti-angiogenic among nuts and seeds. That's why they're specifically called out, in addition to their omega-3 content. Anti-angiogenic means that they basically are good at starving tumors of blood supply. Angiogenesis is the process by which new blood vessels are created, so anti-angiogenic foods make that process slower, not as effective, and therefore when tumors try to grow and recruit lots of blood very quickly, anti-angiogenesis helps to prevent that from happening. So there are all kinds of foods, and many of them on this list actually are anti-angiogenic, as are so many other good plant foods. And then as far as omega-3s go, flax seeds have them, walnuts have them, lots of other nuts and seeds have them. By the way, walnuts are another very good one. They're probably the next best nut after flax seeds as far as I'm concerned. But with omega-3s, it is important to, a lot of vegans are confused here. Vegan sources of omega-3s will provide you with ALA, which is one type of omega-3. There's also DHA and EPA though, and those aren't provided by these things. A certain number of people can convert, if they get enough ALA, they can convert it into DHA and EPA, but if you've been confused about why are some people supplementing with DHA and EPA instead of just eating more nuts and seeds, that's the reason. Not everybody can convert the ALA into DHA and EPA, and they are essential. So definitely worth considering supplementation with DHA and EPA, even if you get lots of it through lots of ALA through vegan sources like flax seeds and walnuts. So why are nuts so great? What's so good about them? Turns out they are a longevity food, and just a quarter cup a day, most days of the week, not even every single day, but a quarter cup most days has been shown to add up to 2 years of life that's a pretty much a no-brainer for me. And if I can add 730 days of life for this pleasurable activity of eating a quarter cup of nuts and seeds most days, that's a no-brainer. So you definitely want to do it. And I mentioned the global burden of disease study a few minutes ago, where they found that the number one thing we do wrong in our diet, number one reason for our culture's health problems, is that we don't eat enough fruit. What they found that the number 3 reason was that we don't eat enough nuts. And then for the record, number 2 was that we eat too much sodium in our diet. So, people will tell you don't eat nuts, and I get that. Sorry, this grind your flax seeds tip is an important one. You want to grind them, they will pass right through your body otherwise. A lot of well-meaning bakers will put them into muffins and all these things, but it turns out they just pass right through you for the most part. So you do want to grind those flax seeds. If at all possible, do it kind of close to the time when you're using them, because if you store them for too long, once they're brown, they will go rancid fairly quickly, because there's so much good stuff in there, so the bugs will go after them. Now the controversy, of course, weight loss, heart disease, I have here. Weight loss, of course, if you pay attention to the caloric density school of weight loss, you know that nuts and seeds are fairly dense in calories. Lots of calories in a fairly small space, making it possible to overeat them, or kind of easy to overeat them if you have a problem with overeating. So, that is a concern, and if that's your school of thought, and if that's the way you're going to lose weight is through a caloric density model like Chef AJ often promotes, then that's something to think about. I just think it's worth, at some point, getting them back into your diet. Because like we said, 2 extra years of life for just a quarter cup a day, that's a pretty good deal. So I just wouldn't want to be out of them for too long. But if they help you to lose the weight, and then you get into a maintenance phase later where you can incorporate them again, I would say that's one of the first foods to add back. And really the same thing with heart disease. Dr. Esselstyn, is very, very well known for his no nuts, no oils, of course, but even no nuts in the diets that he recommends to his heart disease patients. And who am I to say that that's a bad idea? So if that's your approach to preventing or reversing your heart disease, then certainly listen to Dr. Esselstyn and avoid the nuts. But at some point, once you're out of that high risk zone, perhaps consider incorporating them back in. Obviously, I'm not telling you yes, do that or don't. I'll leave back time for questions at the end, so we have plenty of time, I hope. So anyway, they're I think something that for the long run are worth having in your diet, but I understand that in the short term there might be reasons to keep them out. So that's my recommendation there, and obviously it requires doing a little bit of your own research to decide. So how do you get nuts and seeds? These are a pretty easy one to get. I throw them into most smoothies. Works very well. As a salad dressing or sauce, of course, is a great way to do it. It's a great way to get off of the oil, which you will find is not among the 7 foods to eat every single day. So a nut-based dressing on your salads are really, really great, reliable. Again, if you can do a habitual salad and make that your habit, then you don't need to think about when am I going to get my nuts, because you get it in the dressing on your salad. So that's why I love nut-based dressing on salads. If that sounds weird, look up cashew ranch dressings online, look up tahini garlic dressings online. You can find really great recipes from those things, or for those things that will incorporate nuts daily into your diet. Of course, snacks, you can always snack on nuts. That works really well for a quick thing, works well for athletes often. We'll snack on something like that a little bit before a run. And of course, you can spread the butters of nuts onto sandwiches or crackers or however you like to do it. And especially if you're trying to add calories, which some people I know, athletic types and my kids, I try to make sure they do get enough calories. Nut butters are a really good way to do that because it's easier to eat nut butter than it is nuts. You'll eat a larger volume of it that way. And as long as it's whole food fat, then I tend to think for the most part it's healthy. All right, number 4 on our list of foods to eat every single day is onions and garlic, and in general, the allium family. Why do we want to get them? I mentioned Dr. Furman a few times now. He has a series of studies that he's cited that show onions just a half a cup a day compared to no onions at all reduces, he's 5 different cancers, reduces their risks by 50 to 88%. I mean, those are huge numbers when you talk about, people get excited over 10 to 15% dips in cancer risk. So onions are a really, really great food for reducing cancer risk. I mentioned before that they are kind of like cruciferous vegetables in that they contain these organosulfur compounds, which they don't produce ITCs. It's not the same, but it works very similar. And that eye-burning feeling that everyone knows when they're chopping onions, that's the same thing. That's these compounds being released when you break those cell walls by chopping or chewing. So you do want to give that time, get the reaction time to happen. So chop your onions and garlic 15 minutes or so ahead of time, if at all possible. I would say just do them with your cruciferous vegetables, since that works fairly well for most people. And raw is good. I mean, I know eating raw onions is not the easiest thing to do if you want to have a normal, like, friends and social life. So do what you can. Don't forget that things like scallions are raw allium. So just throwing that onto your salad or onto almost any dinner is a really great way to include some amount of raw onions in your diet. I'm not saying you need to always eat them raw. Again, I don't like those sort of directives that say raw is better, so always eat raw onions and don't, start thinking of cooked ones as bad for you. I think that's crazy. Like, let's eat the cooked and let's try to get the raw when we can. Finally, an interesting thing that goes back to our theme of colorful fruits and vegetables being better for us. Turns out that red onions are the best in terms of antioxidant content, and yellow is the next best, followed by white. So decreasing color tends to mean decreasing nutrition. Kind of interesting, right? The red isn't that surprising because those are sort of expensive in the store. But the yellow, I think usually white is more expensive than yellow for the most part. So yellow onions are a really great deal then, as far as nutritional bang for your buck. Yellow onions are a really great deal. So get the red when you can, when you want to. For the most part, they'll make yellow your default, even when the recipe calls for white. Okay, and then when you get onions, of course, we mentioned that almost every dinner, we didn't mention this, in almost every dinner, it's going to start with onions and garlic. That just tends to be the way most of us cook. If you don't eat oil, just water sauteing those things still is going to be the base of many of your meals. And not only is that delicious, but it's a really good practice for health. You can use it as a condiment. We do pickled onions in my house, and my kids love that. It's not actually pickling, so it doesn't take 2 weeks or require whatever is required for pickling. But you just pour a little bit of boiling water over the onions in a strainer, and then put them in with a little bit of salt and sugar, some vinegar or some lime juice. And we usually use red onions for this, and they turn really vibrant pink, and the kids love them, and they put them on whatever. And then we're getting some more almost raw onions in throughout the day. Put it on salads, put it on tacos, put it on Indian food, whatever you like. So that is onions and garlic. Our fifth group is beans, and of course, as we said, that is the legume family. Why do we want beans? They are a blue zone food. You guys all know about the blue zones, I imagine. It's a really, really popular movement, and I think for good reason. There's all kinds of great stuff that comes out of that blue zones research. And it turns out that just about all of these, for those who don't know what blue zones are, these pockets of societies around the world that produce the largest number of people who live to be 100. And then looking at those groups, it's not the only way to do science, but we can look at those groups and say, what do they have in common? What do they do that might be leading to their long life? And it turns out that they, almost all of them, eat lots and lots of beans. They base their diets around beans. You hear people recommending a cup or a cup and a half of beans every single day. So absolutely do that. And then in 2007, the American Institute for Cancer Research did a study, and they concluded that we should eat beans in every single meal. They said, let's eat beans in every meal. And as far as I know, their reason wasn't the more you eat, the better you feel, so let's have beans. They actually did actual science to come up with that. But the other one's good enough for me. So, what do we need to know about beans? Their tofu counts, but tempeh's better. That means that these things that we think of as processed beans, and tofu is somewhat processed, but as Gregor states, beans are so healthy that when you have a food like tofu, that he says is about half as healthy as beans because you're missing some of the fiber and some of the other great stuff that comes in the whole bean. Half of something that's really, really good is still pretty darn good. So Gregor still considers tofu a good, healthy food you should try to get fairly often. And tempeh being slightly better because you can actually see the beans in it. It's somewhat more of a whole food than tofu is. So if you got the choice between those two, tend to go with tempeh. But tofu, certainly don't shy away from it because it's soy or because it's somewhat processed. It's still a really good food. And I mean, the soy debate is a huge one. It goes on and on. You can draw your own conclusions about whether soy is something you want to include in your diet. I mentioned people like Gregor and Furman, and as far as I can tell, they're quite on board with soy. So I don't see any reason to avoid it. But that is a personal choice. And the other thing to know about beans is if you start eating beans from having never done that before, and you do it by the easiest way, which would be go to the grocery store, buy some canned beans, that's fine. The problem is you're going to start getting more sodium that way if you don't watch out and get reduced sodium beans or no salt added beans. So if you're going to do it canned, try to get those so that you're not adding excess sodium into your diet. Because remember that global burden of disease study said too much sodium was the number 2 problem in our standard American diet. So you don't want to be adding a bunch of sodium just because you're making a good choice, like adding beans. Of course, you can make them at home from scratch, but again, as much as I like doing that and it's fun, and when I find the time, I will actually make the beans from scratch.
I just think let's try to have habits that are sustainable and easy to get started with, and buying cans is probably the easier one than making them at home. Also look out for BPA. That is in a lot of cans, pretty much all the cans up until a few years ago. There is now an increasing number of selection available of cans that say BPA free right on them. So you can get the BPA free cans and you can get reduced sodium or no salt added. Just be mindful when you're buying those beans. Where do you get them? I mean, they show up in just about every single dinner as far as plant-based diets go. Unless you're making a conscious effort to avoid beans, by and large, they're going to be showing up in your dinners. They can show up in your lunches. As we said, American Institute for Cancer Research said let's get them every meal. So how do you get beans in breakfast? I mean, it's not that easy, but there are a lot of like Southwest style breakfasts that have refried beans in them. We have tofu scrambles, which are never a popular favorite among vegans. And we do, actually with my family, we do a white bean spread that I got from the Blue Zone Solution book. It's just a very simple white bean mash. It's kind of like hummus, but has no tahini in it. And that works as like on bagels really well as a little spread in the morning. So a nice savory breakfast like that, that's a really good way to work those beans in. And you can even add the beans into a smoothie if that's your thing. That's a favorite of the vegan bodybuilding types. It is a place I have been unwilling to go so far. Just, I don't know, the white beans in the smoothie just is stomach turning to me. But I haven't tried. So it's not really fair, but it just seems so gross. But you can put silken tofu in a smoothie, of course. When I've done that, it doesn't contribute much flavor. It just kind of adds a creamy texture to the smoothie. So if you're trying to get more beans into your breakfast, you can totally add them into a smoothie, and lots of other ways as well.
What about miso soup?
Miso soup, like they serve here? Yeah, not something I make at home, but totally. When you're on the cruise, why not? All right, number 6. This is probably the most faddish, hottest health food that I have on my list here. Turmeric. If you're not already eating turmeric, then I bet in a year you probably will be. It has seemed to reach mainstream levels now, and every grocery store has some new brand of turmeric. Actually, brand of turmeric, which is odd. But it's not just turmeric. There are other spices, so I don't want to ignore those. There are lots of other really good herbs and spices. Turmeric particularly good for its anti-inflammatory compounds, making it great for athletes, making it great for lots of things, including things like recovering from hospital surgery. It actually works really well for. But anti-cancer is a big thing. But speaking of anti-inflammatory compounds, ginger is a great one also, black pepper. There are lots of other herbs and spices, so I don't mean to ignore those. For simplicity, I'm calling this turmeric, but those other ones, they get worked into your diet. Like if you're just making lots of dinners, you're going to tend to put ginger in things. You're going to tend to put black pepper on things. So I don't feel like there's quite as much need to actually focus on that like there is with turmeric, which, unless you eat a lot of Indian food, just doesn't show up in that many diets. Of course, the pigment in turmeric is called curcumin. That's what most people believe is responsible for most of the great properties of turmeric. Interestingly, though, it's not just the curcumin, because there's a great study that Gregor has shared where they actually removed the curcumin from turmeric, fed it to one group of people as a supplement, and the other people got the turmeric that had the curcumin removed from it. So just what was left after the curcumin was removed, and it turned out that the group taking the whole turmeric minus curcumin, the supposed good part, that there were lots of benefits that actually outperformed the curcumin supplementation group in many areas. That's not to say that you should remove the curcumin from your turmeric and not just get it all together. It's a great thing to do. But there are a lot of supplements out there that are curcumin supplements, and as much as I think they're good, you probably get some increased bioavailability from the way they've made the supplement. I still tend to like the whole food approach, and I would just rather eat that turmeric root. But it's not a bad idea. Maybe do both if you want to, kind of hedge your bets, I guess. Speaking of the bioavailability, though, if you're going to go the whole turmeric route, a really great way to get more from it is add some black pepper to it, whether it is raw turmeric or ground turmeric, like in a curry type dish. Adding black pepper increases the bioavailability by 20 times, and that's pretty significant. You don't want to waste that stuff. So I kind of like that, like a natural way of increasing that bioavailability, rather than a supplement that promises to increase it 1,000 times, because do we really want 1,000 times more bioavailability of something? I don't really know. And there are a few things to think about with turmeric. That one in particular, like it's a really, really powerful, almost medicinal food. There's all these really, really great traits, but we don't know what happens if you take tons of it. If it's something is that powerful, I think it's smart to be mindful and say, let's watch out how much we actually do eat. Let's not eat too much. So Dr. Gregor has talked about this, and he says he recommends a quarter-inch slice of raw turmeric, which, as you saw in the picture, kind of looks like ginger. So a quarter inch of that, or a quarter teaspoon of the ground stuff. Either one of those works. Get it with black pepper to increase the bioavailability. But he said some Indian cultures eat up to a teaspoon a day of turmeric, which is great. But we don't really know what happens if you eat a tablespoon or more of that per day. That's not something that's really done anywhere else. So it's sort of this new, it's not a new food, but it's a new hot new food. And I'm sure soon enough people will study what happens when you get giant doses and maximally bioavailable for human supplements. But who knows if that will be good or bad. So quarter teaspoon or quarter inch a day is a really good rule of thumb to follow with it. And gallstones, if you have gallstones, it actually can increase pain by causing the gallbladder to contract. So that's something to be mindful of if you want to start eating turmeric and have gallstones. So where do you get it? This is one of those foods I mentioned. It's kind of weird. It doesn't just show up in your diet unless you make it that way. So one really way I mentioned kind of hanging up food on the hook of something you're already doing. If you're already eating a smoothie or already eating a salad, make that your time to get your slice of raw turmeric. For me, that's the only way I will remember to do it. I prefer the salad because I don't like black pepper in my smoothies. So what I do is when I make a salad, slice the turmeric for everybody, put a little piece of turmeric just on everybody's salad. You will know when you take that bite that has it in there because you will taste it. But it's not horrible. When it's with a bunch of other lettuce and stuff, then honestly it works really fine. And like I said, you'll get the black pepper on your salad for the most part anyway. But it does work in a smoothie as well. And as strong and sort of bitter or weird tasting as turmeric is, it really doesn't ruin a smoothie. It's just, you notice that it's in there if you put a lot. But I don't think it's that unpleasant. It's just a different taste in the smoothie. And of course, ground and cooked dishes, the way it's often done in Indian cultures, works wonderfully well too. And ground and raw are not the same. They have different properties. So if you can kind of mix it up and kind of do both, that's certainly a good thing. And finally, my last one of the 7 big ones is green or white tea. Coffee is great too. I don't want to say don't drink coffee, right? We all like coffee. No, not everybody. I like coffee. I assume most people do too. And I don't think you need to pick one or the other. I don't know if coffee is really enough we can't call it a health food. There's lots of good evidence saying that it is good and does a lot of good things. There's also some evidence saying it's not that good and does some bad things. Tea, though, seems to be the better choice by and large. You get many of those benefits without some of the downsides. So tea's one that I'd say do, and if you love coffee, like I do, drink your cup of coffee first in the morning, but then instead of that second or third cup of coffee, switch that to green or white tea. You'll get a little bit less caffeine and you'll get way more nutrition in doing that. What to know about green tea? It's really special. There's this ECGC compound in the tea bush that isn't available anywhere else, and there are other compounds like that. They're only in the tea bush. So, they're great anti-inflammatory and cancer fighting, just like all these other foods. So if you can do it, get the green tea or the white tea rather than herbal or the caffeine-free teas, but I totally get that some people are going to want to do that. I mentioned anti-angiogenesis earlier. Tea happens to be highly anti-angiogenic, so that's another good reason to build it into your diet, even if it's not the default easy thing to do. Make the effort to build it in. What to know about tea? The tea snobs in here will say, if you're making green tea, you should also do this. They'll hold their pinky out and say you should only boil it at temperature 175 degrees and only for a minute or so, otherwise it'll destroy the flavors or whatever. It turns out if you want more antioxidant capacity and you want to make it as good as you can, brew that tea at close to boiling, like boil your water, pour it immediately onto your tea, and do it for 3 to 4 minutes. That will get the most out of, nutrition-wise, will get the most out of that tea into your body. It will make your tea taste somewhat more tannic and maybe bitter than most tea drinkers would like it, but to me, that's just what tea tastes like, because I've made it that way for so long. So hotter and longer is a good way to do it. And of course, I mentioned herbal teas. They're a really great alternative. You can get lots of them caffeine-free. Hibiscus is a good one. Lots and lots of antioxidants in there. So if you're just sensitive to caffeine, you for whatever reason don't want caffeine in your diet, then herbal tea is a perfectly good alternative, even if they're maybe not quite as good as the real stuff. So where do you get green tea? As I mentioned, it's a beverage anytime. We've talked about the blue zones a little bit. The blue zones way, apparently, according to Dan Buettner in the Blue Zone Solution, is coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon, and a little bit of red wine at night. That is a plan that I can live with. So that's what I typically do. You can also, though, if you don't want to do the tea ritual of making it and the time it takes to do that, you can throw those whole tea leaves right into your smoothie. If you're doing smoothies, you could probably even do it with oatmeal if you really want it. We were talking about whole food nutrition, so why not get the whole leaf rather than an extract form like most people get when they actually brew tea and then take the leaves away. You will get more caffeine, by the way, if you are eating the whole leaf, so be mindful, obviously. But you can use the leaves or the powder, throw that into a smoothie, and it turns out to be really quite pleasant. Okay, so that's 7. I promised you 10. The three others here that I'll just go quickly on, which I call the honorable mentions, are other vegetables. Other vegetables and whole grains kind of go together in that, to me, they are like the canvas, right? Like if you do the effort to make good dinners, make good lunches, make good breakfasts, and you're making sure to include these other foods, you're going to end up getting whole grains, you're going to end up getting other vegetables. They're just going to show up in almost any recipe that you try to make. So there's not too much reason to focus on adding those in. Like if we can minimize the stress and minimize the number of foods that we're thinking about each day, then I say we should do it if we're getting these things automatically. So those don't deserve that much attention. Mushrooms are one, as I mentioned, like Furman says get them every day. I think they are very important. They're important in a different way. They don't have the typical micronutrients that other fruits and vegetables do. They have more of a medicinal quality to them. So, lots of specific mushrooms you can get for medicinal uses if you want. That's way beyond what we want to get into here. But the white button mushrooms are a really great one. They're cheap. People assume that because they're cheap and because they're white, they're not going to be very nutritious. But it turns out they're not. They don't follow that color rule. As I said, they're kind of weird. So they're just fine. They're just like typical mushrooms as far as nutrition goes. They're not any worse just because they're cheap and white. So get the white button ones if you want to save money. And you should probably cook your mushrooms. They do contain a toxin that is destroyed in the cooking process. That toxin has been shown to be harmful in animals. It has not actually been shown, as far as I know, to be harmful in humans. So there is some debate in the community about whether raw mushrooms are fine. I say I don't really like raw mushrooms that much anyway, so why not cook them and be happy with that. As I said, they're kind of hard to build into your diet. They don't show up all the time, so they are worth making the effort to do. I don't know that every day is that important. I mean, the only way to get mushrooms every day really is if you have a routine that says, at dinner time I cook my side dish of mushrooms and that I add to every single dinner. That's just not really sustainable for me, so I don't get mushrooms every single day. But I think as often as you can get them in, you should. All right, my favorite part of this talk, and not too long remaining, is the 3 meals that make this easy. I've referred to these meals now throughout this talk, so you probably can guess what some of them are. For the record, I'm a smoothie fan still. I like drinking smoothies. The controversy around them, of course, is that you are blending foods up. And when you blend foods up, it's pretty well known that you will tend to consume more calories than you would if you just took those same fruits and put them on a plate or a bowl and ate them in their whole unblended form. The reason I'm a fan of smoothies, though, first of all, I'm an athlete, so if I need more calories, blending food to get more calories is actually a pretty good thing to do, or at least is a useful way of getting more calories. I don't think it's good to chug that smoothie down in 2 minutes. I think you should drink it at the pace that you would eat a whole bowl of fruit and nuts and whatever else was making in there. So, I don't think it's so bad to get these excess calories, but there are some people, especially if you're trying to lose weight, for whom a smoothie would not be the best choice because of that caloric density issue. You make it smaller, and you fit those same calories into a smaller space that you can consume much more quickly. So that's something to be mindful of if you're trying to lose weight. The other thing about smoothies, though, I think people at the beginning, as I mentioned, I kind of tend to focus on the practical and the habit change. I don't think the choice for most people who are starting out is between, should I have a smoothie or should I have this plate full of berries, other fruits, flax seeds, and other nuts and greens? It's not that. It's between a smoothie and an Egg McMuffin. So I say, hands down, go with the smoothie and don't worry about it. And don't worry that someone is telling you it's not a good idea because it's a little bit more calorically dense and you can absorb it faster. I think that's crazy compared to the huge benefits of eating actual real food for your breakfast instead of an Egg McMuffin. So for some people, smoothie might not be the answer, and if it's not, oatmeal is a really perfect way to get almost all these same foods, and this way you're doing it in an unblended way. Plus you get that extra serving of whole grains, so soak those oats the night before and make oatmeal if you prefer. On the left side here of my list of what the things you can get in a smoothie, actually for those who can't see it, the whole list of the stuff that you could theoretically put into your smoothie is berries, other fruits, flax seeds, other nuts, greens, optionally cruciferous if you want. I don't really like broccoli in my smoothies, but you can do it. Green or white tea, turmeric, and as I mentioned, beans. You can actually put beans in a smoothie if that is your goal, and lots of people do it, even who aren't bodybuilders. They just want that extra serving of beans. So you can get all that into your smoothie. You can get most of that into your oatmeal as well. Might be a little bit harder to get some of the savory stuff in there, but you can do savory oatmeal instead of and just kind of leave the fruit out and do more of a savory one. That works totally fine too. So that's smoothies. Here's good evidence that smoothies are good. I don't know what more evidence I really need and how happy that woman is.
I don't know how happy that is.
But that is also not the way to make a smoothie because I don't know what she's expecting is going to happen there. with lemon on, she will not probably be quite so happy when she does that. So that's breakfast. Breakfast time with smoothie, that's sort of my default thing. Doesn't have to be every day. This system is something that I strive to do. It's my kind of ideal, my North Star maybe, that I compare everything against, and if I get off of it, at the end of a long trip, I'll remember, get home, get back to my smoothie in the morning, because that just sort of sets me off on a good course for the day. What I try to do after that, in lunchtime, consistently, is the giant salad with beans and nut-based dressing. I mentioned a few times in this talk that having a salad in your diet, it's not going to be, it's a really easy way to add those beans in, and if you can make that salad a consistent part of your diet, that's much more reliable than saying, I need to remember to get my greens sometime today. So have a salad, have something in your diet that you can hang that other thing on the hook of this thing you already do, if that makes sense. And that giant salad with beans and a nut-based dressing is the way to do that. Obviously, right in the name of it, you've got beans and you've got nuts as well. As I said, the oil's not a really good idea. You've probably heard that 1,000 times in this cruise already. So if you're going to build something into your daily habits, if you're going to make the effort of creating a daily habit, let's create that as the ideal, as the best possible thing we can do, which we mean not having oil in it. If for you that means still now and then you're going to have a special treat and you're going to put oil in the salad or make a special vinaigrette or whatever, fine with me. But make your default, make the automatic thing, the thing that you're striving to do, the best. Make it the nut-based dressing. Find one that you like, whether it's the cashew ranch or the tahini garlic, or many, many others that are out there nowadays. In that giant salad with beans and nut-based dressing, of all these foods I've been talking about today, you can get greens, cruciferous vegetables. As I mentioned, do the half lettuce maybe and half something more bitter like arugula or cabbage or whatever else you might want in there. Onions, as I said, you can put the pickled onions, you can put the scallions on a salad to get some raw on there. Beans are right part of it. They're an essential part of making this salad a meal, making it filling and satisfactory for you. Nuts and seeds are going to be in your dressing. You can eat that slice of turmeric right then if you want. You can put fruits on your salad or with your salad. It's another great time to get those berries. If you can do berries on a salad, it's another easy way to remind you to get those berries. And whole grains are an option. If the salad with nut-based dressing and beans is not going to be enough for you for lunch, and if you're very athletic and you want to get more calories, then it very well may not be enough for you for lunch. Then have it with a big side of whole grains, or have it on top of a bed of quinoa, have it with a whole grain roll, whatever you want. All kinds of ways to add whole grains to this big salad that hopefully will become a staple, part of the framework of your day. So that is breakfast and lunch covered. If you've eaten a smoothie or oatmeal in the morning and this giant salad with beans and nut-based dressing by noon or 1, then come 3, 4 o'clock, you've eaten almost entirely the stuff that we've been talking about, and you've had it a lot of it raw, a little bit of it cooked. Really, really great way to do things, and you're off to a great start. Finally, for dinner, what do you eat? I know a lot of people this is the big meal. When we think about cooking plant-based food, when we think about cooking, we're thinking about what are we going to cook for dinner? What are we making for the family, putting on the table that's going to be this, this end point to the day, this thing that we all huddle around and connect over. It's really important to have a nice, good stable of meals. What I've done is made almost all of mine become what I call a grain, a green, and a bean. It turns out that doesn't sound like the most attractive framework, I know. I know. If you go through the What Vegans Eat tag on Instagram, you will see lots of what I like to call the big bowl of sadness. It's just this giant mush thing that looks awful, and I don't know why people tag that with What Vegans Eat, because it just doesn't do anything for our movement. But they don't actually all look like that. And I'll get just to the next slide to some examples of what a grain, and a bean actually looks like when you're talking practically and being a little bit more creative with it. But just before we get to that, grain, and bean, what it does for you, gives you whole grains, beans, obviously, those are all part of it. You can usually do this in one pot. You can start it with onions and garlic if you'd like, and why not? You can add your mushrooms in there. You could add your turmeric as a ground spice this time into the grain, green, and bean. If you've got some sort of sauce or curry-like seasoning that you're going to add in there at the end. Of course, cruciferous and other vegetables work perfectly well as your green or in addition to your greens. And then nuts or seeds, as I mentioned, you can put a sauce or a topping onto a green, and a bean, and suddenly this big bowl of sadness mush thing becomes a Buddha bowl or something else that has a nice name to it. So make a nice dressing or sauce with nuts and seeds, and it's way, way better than it's worthy of the What Vegans Eat. So, for the record, Trader Joe's has stolen this name from me. They put it on one of their frozen products. So I don't know what to do about that. But if they ever put No Meat Athlete on a product, then I'm going to go after them.
What?
I said Trader Joe's, they have a product called a grain, and a bean. They That's okay. They're good. We like Trader Joe's. For the most part, they're all right. But anyway, neither here nor there. So some examples of grain and green and bean that are not big bowls of sadness. Lots of soups and stews can be this way. So in my first book, which is called Nominati, it is available in the bookstore. The cookbook is sold out, but the first one is still there. So that has a chickpea pasta soup in there, or maybe it's called hearty chickpea pasta stew or something like that. And it has chickpeas, it has pasta, of course. It also has some tomato sauce, lots of veggie stock, and some greens stirred in at the end. So that soup then has the bean, the grain in the form of the pasta, which is a whole grain pasta, of course, and you've got the greens stirred in at the end. So that is a grain, and a bean in a single pot, like many of these things can be. But it's not that sad. It's a really nice stew. Hawaiian beans and rice works really well. You can do beans, rice with some pineapple and some cabbage. I'm being maybe a little bit liberal here and calling cabbage greens, but that works perfectly well. Any kind of stir fry with tofu, bok choy in it. There again, if you put that over brown rice or some other grain, you've got a grain, and a bean. Pasta with chickpeas and arugula. All kinds of different Italian sauces, classic Italian sauces, have beans as part of them. And so pasta with beans in the sauce isn't just like a weird vegan thing. It actually is a very traditional thing that has a lot of history. So do that, stir a green into the sauce, and now you've got a grain, and a bean in the form of a pasta dish. Tempeh tacos is another favorite one. I got that from Rip Esselstyn. You basically just dump barbecue sauce onto a tempeh in a pan and put it on tacos. But serve that with some greens on top, whether that's sliced cabbage, that's the way I like to do it, or something more interesting. And you've got grains in your tortilla shell, you've got the beans as the filling, the tempeh, and then on top of that you've got some greens, plus a sauce, in this case barbecue sauce to add flavor. So the point is, there are many, many ways to do a grain, and a bean. And if you get home from this trip, if you're new to this plant-based diet and you're overwhelmed because you've bought 19 cookbooks, and I mean that is a real problem. If you have too many cookbooks, I think you've probably all done this before, you're trying to pick out a meal, and you just have too many recipes at your disposal. You don't know what to make because there are so many, and there are no limitations on what you might make. So when I get in that situation, one thing I'll say is, what do I have in my refrigerator? And if I have zucchini, then I will look up zucchini recipes. And now this little bit of structure and restriction makes it very easy to choose a meal. But usually what I'll do is say, what of all these books, all these recipes at my disposal, which one of these are a grain, and a bean? And then when you glance down the table of contents, you can pretty quickly find the ones that might be a good candidate. And typically they're really easy and quick to make. As I said, they don't require a lot of cleanup because they're usually in one or a few pots. So that's a grain, and a bean. And finally, how would it all fit together into one nice, perfect day? I'm hesitant to use the word perfect, that's why I put it in quotes. I don't like the perfectionist mindset. I'm not telling anyone you should go home and try to do this perfect day every single day for the rest of your life, because that is absolutely no way to go to have it. Instead, pick one of these meals that you really like, that you sound like you think this might benefit your particular lifestyle, and incorporate that one. So add the giant salad with the beans and nut-based dressing. Say I'm going to make that my lunch. Or I'm going to do the smoothie or oatmeal in the morning. Like pick one of these, start there, make a perfect day, one that includes that. And then after a week or two of that, start to incorporate more of these if you can. So breakfast, as I said, it's going to be a smoothie for me. Typically, I'm also going to have coffee with it. Now and then, if I'm feeling particularly mindful or inspired or whatever, I'll have some green tea instead. Morning snack, fruit is, I tend to still be in the mood for fruit in the mornings, even before lunch, but after that smoothie. So fruit with nut butter, if I'm trying to add some calories, is a nice snack. Again, really good opportunity to have tea, even if you've already started the day with coffee, as long as you're not going overboard with the caffeine. For lunch, as I mentioned many times, giant salad with beans and nut-based dressing. And of course, to that, to make it more substantial, more filling, you can add any kind of whole grain side you'd like. By the way, this is all very, very flexible. So I'm saying this is a perfect day, but this is a billion different days if you want it to be. You can do any smoothie you want, any oatmeal you want, any lunch you want. There's no saying we're not getting a variety of food here. There's lots of variety and lots of flexibility that keeps this new. Afternoon snack, for me, this is when I'm really no longer in the mood for fruit and I want something more savory, like not quite dinner time, but something that is going to still be salty and good. So hummus and veggies or whole grains, that's what I would typically do in this afternoon. That often comes around my run. If I'm going to go for a run, that might be my hour before the run snack that I'll do. And then dinner, of course, the grain, and the bean. That's all you need there. Like I said, to wrap this up, none of this is to be set in stone. I don't want anyone here to take a picture of this and say, I'm going to eat this exact whole way on Monday when I get home, and Tuesday after that, and Wednesday after that. That's not the point. This, for me, as I said, is sort of the North Star. This is like what I am trying to do most of the time, and if on a given day I do 2 out of these 3 meals, 2 out of 3 main meals in this way, then I'm pretty happy with how that day turned out. Because the alternative for me isn't going to be very bad. Once you're used to eating this way, if I'm deviating from my breakfast smoothie, then it's probably because I'm having a whole grain bagel with that white bean spread on it. So like, it's not like I'm having a total junk food instead of this. And I hope that you can get there as well. But really the point is, we want, as I said at the beginning of this talk, what you do for a couple weeks doesn't matter. It means nothing. If you go home from this cruise and you're all excited and inspired and you have this new plan, and it lasts you 2 weeks, and then your friends call and they're going to happy hour or whatever, and you decide not to do your dinner that day that you had planned, and instead you eat tortilla chips and nachos, maybe find a vegan nacho cheese, and you eat so much of that that's your dinner. It's fine. Like, you don't want to do that, but please don't have such a perfectionist mindset that says, well, 2 weeks after that cruise, I had those nachos at dinner, so therefore I'm done. That whole thing's in the past. I finished. But it's funny, but honestly, that is what most people end up doing. That's how most people try to change. They try to change everything at once, drastic changes, and it ends up not lasting at all. It lasts for 2 weeks of perfection, and then it all comes crashing down. So go for small steps, incorporate little bits at a time, let it become a habit.